Adaora had dreamed of this day, the moment she would finally hold her babies in her arms. In a small hospital in Enugu, she lay exhausted but smiling as the nurse placed two tiny beautiful girls on her chest. "Twins," the nurse said happily. "Kamsi and Kaima." But instead of joy, Oena stepped back as if he had seen a ghost. His face went pale. Before Adaora could ask what was wrong, his mother rushed in, eyes wide with fear and anger. She didn't even look at the babies. She leaned close to Oena and hissed, "I warned you. Twins bring disaster to this family. Your grandfather died the day twins were born. Your uncle lost his farm. This is a curse." Adaora's heart dropped. "Mama, please, they're just babies," she whispered, holding them tighter. But Obena's mind was already poisoned. He refused to touch the girls. He refused to sit beside Adaora. Instead, he stared at the twins like they were the reason his whole world would collapse. That night, while Adaora was still weak from childbirth, Oena walked into the hospital room and spoke in a cold, trembling voice. "I can't keep bad luck in my house." Adaora looked up, confused. "Oena, these are your daughters." But he didn't listen. He grabbed her bag, dropped it on her lap, and pointed to the door. His mother stood behind him, nodding with approval. "Leave," he said. "Take your curse with you." Rain poured down as Adaora stepped out of the hospital, clutching her newborn daughters to her chest. She had no money, no home, and no one to call. But as the babies whimpered softly against her, she lifted her chin. They weren't a curse. They were her reason to fight. Adaora's new life began in the small, cramped room behind Mama Ifani's roadside restaurant. The room was barely bigger than a storage space. One old mattress on the floor, a single window that didn't open properly, and a tiny corner where she kept boiled water for the babies. But to Adaora it was safety. It was the first place she could hold Kamsi and Kaima without fear of being thrown out again. Mama Ifani, a tough woman with a soft heart, handed her a key and said, "It's not much, my daughter, but it's yours for now." Adaora almost cried from relief. Days turned into weeks, and survival became a full-time battle. Adaora worked in the restaurant during the mornings, carrying trays and washing plates with her babies tied on her back. In the afternoons, she cleaned houses around the neighborhood. And at night, when everyone else slept, she braided hair under a dim bulb just to earn a little more. Some nights, she was so tired she fell asleep sitting up, her hands still holding braiding thread. There were days when she had only enough money for one plate of rice, and she always gave it to her daughters. She drank water and told herself she wasn't hungry, but people in the neighborhood were cruel. Whenever she passed by with her twins strapped to her chest, whispers followed her. Look at her, still carrying those cursed children. Her husband chased her. What does that tell you? She should have left them somewhere. Twins bring nothing but trouble. The words stabbed her heart, but Adaora never responded with anger. She would smile softly, adjust her babies on her back, and say only one thing. One day, they will shine brighter than all of you. Sometimes late at night when the twins were asleep and the whole street was quiet, Adaora let herself cry, not because she was weak, but because she was fighting alone. She worried about school fees. She worried about the future. She worried about failing her daughters the way their father had failed all of them. But every morning, when Kamsi and Kaima woke up giggling and reaching for her with their tiny hands, her strength returned. She kissed their foreheads and whispered the same promise every single day. "I will make sure you never feel unwanted, not even for a second." And with that, she tied them securely to her back, stepped out of the tiny room, and faced another day, hungry, tired, mocked, but unbroken. Years passed, and the small room behind Mama Ifani's restaurant became a place full of laughter, learning, and determination. Kamsi and Kaima grew from tiny, fragile babies into bright, curious girls. Adaora poured all her love and energy into them, teaching them the value of hard work, kindness, and believing in themselves, even when the world had labeled them a curse. Kamsi loved numbers, machines, and solving puzzles. By the time she was a teenager, she was already building small gadgets and fixing broken electronics in the neighborhood. People who once mocked her couldn't believe their eyes when she solved problems that adults struggled with. Kaima, on the other hand, had a heart for helping others. She loved biology and medicine, spending hours reading about the human body and caring for anyone who was sick in their small community. Even at a young age, she had a way of making people feel safe and heard. Through it all, Oena shielded them from the harsh truth of their father's rejection. She never spoke of Oena, never told them how he had called them bad luck and thrown them out. Every time the topic came close, she would smile gently and say, "Some stories don't need to be told. What matters is who we choose to be." She prayed every night that her daughters would grow up feeling wanted, loved, and unstoppable, exactly what they deserved. School wasn't easy. Oena worked tirelessly to pay tuition and buy books. She stayed up late helping with homework, often falling asleep with pens in her hand, yet she never let her daughters see her exhaustion. She wanted them to believe the world was full of opportunity, not judgment. By the time Kamsi graduated as a talented engineer, she was already receiving job offers from top firms. Kaima, now a gifted medical student, won a scholarship that promised to take her to one of the best hospitals in Nigeria. The twins were unstoppable, shining brighter than anyone had imagined. And through it all, Oena watched them with pride swelling in her chest. Her heart ached for the days they had almost lost, the nights when they slept hungry, the cruel words from strangers, and the father who never believed in them. But in those moments she whispered softly to herself, "They are more than enough. They are everything I prayed for." Kamsi and Kaima didn't just survive, they rose. And with every achievement, Oena knew her love had turned their so-called curse into the brightest blessing of all. While Oena and her daughters were growing stronger and happier, Obena's world was falling apart. The business he had spent years building went up in flames. Literally. One night, a fire swallowed his factory, destroying everything he had worked for. He watched helplessly as years of hard work turned to ashes. Insurance barely covered half, and creditors began calling, demanding payment he didn't have. His second wife, who once seemed loyal, left him without a second thought. She packed her bags, taking their children and leaving Oena alone in the cold, empty house he had always wanted to fill with a perfect family. Neighbors whispered about him, shaking their heads. He rejected his first family, and now see what he has, they said. Some curses follow you no matter where you go. Then his mother, the woman whose words had driven him to abandon Oena and the twins, fell seriously ill. She had always been his guiding voice, his protector, and now she lay in a hospital bed, weak and coughing, needing him to care for her. But Oena, who had once turned away from responsibility, had no strength left. He spent sleepless nights worrying about money, his reputation, and the consequences of every choice he had made. For the first time in his life, Oena began to see the truth. The blessings he had ignored, the love he had abandoned, and the family he had thrown away. They were what he had lost. The fire that destroyed his business, the woman who left him, the illness that struck his mother, all felt like a mirror showing him what his life could have been if he had only embraced his family instead of fearing them. Everywhere he went, people whispered behind his back. "The man who chased away his children," they said. "He embraced curses instead of blessings." Even strangers looked at him with pity. Oena tried to reach out to fix things, but no one took him seriously. He called old friends, offered money, begged for help, but doors were closed. The shame and regret weighed on him like a heavy stone. He started to remember Oena's face, the nights he had abandoned her, the cries of the babies he had refused to hold. For the first time, Oena realized he had not just lost wealth or comfort, he had lost love, respect, and the chance to be part of something greater than himself. Alone in his empty house, staring at the walls that once held his dreams, he whispered to no one in particular, "What have I done?" His downfall was complete, not just in wealth or status but in spirit. And the bitter truth he couldn't escape was that while he had run from blessings, they had grown without him, far brighter than he could ever imagine. Oena had spent years chasing money, chasing power, and running from the life he had abandoned. But now, broke and desperate, he realized the only thing he truly wanted, the family he had thrown away, was out of reach. He called old contacts, asked questions, and finally learned where Oena lived. His heart pounded as he drove to the modest house tucked away in a quiet street. When he arrived, he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. The small yard was filled with laughter, Kamsi and Kaima were running around, their schoolbooks in one hand, their smiles brighter than anything he had ever seen. Eudora stood at the door, her face glowing with a quiet pride, holding a tray of food she had just prepared. The house wasn't fancy, but it was warm, alive, and full of love, everything Oena had once dismissed. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, forcing a smile. Eudora. I wanted to see you, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Eudora looked at him, calm but unreadable, and nodded politely. He tried to act confident, straightening his shirt, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. He wanted to appear proud, as if he had every right to be there. But the girls noticed him first. Kamsi tilted her head, her eyes sharp and questioning. Kaima crossed her arms, studying him like a stranger. He remembered how tiny they had been, how fragile and helpless. And now they were taller than him in spirit, full of confidence, and completely unafraid of the man who had abandoned them. Oena's smile faltered. I am proud of you, he said, looking from one to the other, hoping to see recognition, longing, maybe even forgiveness. But all he saw were wary eyes, silent judgment, and a clear message that he was not welcome in their world. Eudora stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her daughter's shoulders. Oena, she said softly, you're here now, but this is their life, and it's not yours to control. For the first time, Oena felt the sharp edge of reality. The family he had ignored, the daughters he had rejected, were thriving without him. His wealth, his status, even his regrets. None of it mattered. Kamsi and Kaima didn't need him, and Eudora had built a life full of love and pride in his absence. He swallowed hard, his chest tightening. The man who once threw them out now stood on their doorstep, invisible in the light of the family he had lost. And for the first time he understood, this reunion was not his to claim. Kaima had always dreamed of this day, her wedding day. She imagined laughter, flowers, and the people she loved most surrounding her. When she told Eudora that she had found the man she wanted to spend her life with, her mother's eyes sparkled with pride, but also with a quiet, knowing strength. Eudora helped with the preparations, made phone calls, and even sewed a small part of Kaima's dress herself, but she let Kaima take the lead. Word spread fast in the neighborhood, and soon even Oena heard the news. His heart raced at the thought of the wedding. He couldn't bear the idea that his daughters had grown up, accomplished so much, and were moving forward without him. He decided he had to be part of it, at least in appearance. The day he called Eudora, his voice full of authority and false confidence, he said, I am still your father, the head of this family. I will walk Kaima down the aisle. It's my right. Eudora stayed silent. She had anticipated this. She had always known that one day he might try to reclaim a place he had long abandoned. She didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't beg. She simply let Kaima handle it. When Kaima heard Oena's demand, she looked at him calmly, her eyes steady and unafraid. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She smiled, but her words cut sharper than any anger could. A man who didn't walk with me in life, she said, her voice clear and unwavering, cannot walk me to the altar. You were not there when I needed you, and now, you don't get to pretend that you were. Oena's face paled. He opened his mouth to protest, but Kaima held up a hand, stopping him. Around her, family, friends, and guests watched in stunned silence. No one dared say a word. Kaima had taken control of her story, her life, and her happiness. Eudora felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of pride, not sadness. Her daughter had learned what she had always taught her. Love and respect must be earned, not demanded. Oena turned away, defeated and speechless. The father who once decided their fate now realized that his authority had no power over the life he had refused to be part of. Kaima had grown into a woman who stood tall, fearless, and untouchable, and she would walk forward on her own terms. And as Eudora hugged her, whispering, I am so proud of you, Kaima smiled, feeling the weight of her past lift. The wedding wouldn't just be a celebration of love, it would be a triumph over the man who had once called them a curse. The day of Kaima's wedding arrived, and the venue was alive with music, flowers, and laughter. Guests filled the hall, admiring the decorations and the joy that radiated from the bride and her family. Eudora stood nearby, calm and proud, watching her daughters take center stage. Kamsi had been helping Kaima with last-minute touches, adjusting her veil and smoothing her dress, and both girls were glowing with excitement. Then Oena arrived. He stepped out of his car dressed in a suit so expensive it shone under the sunlight, like a king arriving at his court. He walked through the crowd, expecting admiration, bows, and whispers of respect. He scanned the room, looking for recognition, waiting for everyone to marvel at his presence. But instead he saw smiles, not for him, but for the bride and her family. As the ceremony began, Kaima and Kamsi stepped forward to thank everyone who had supported them. They spoke with grace, gratitude, and warmth, acknowledging friends, mentors, and family who had been there through thick and thin. And then they paused, deliberately leaving Oena out. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle. Obena's confident smile froze, replaced by confusion, then shock. Guests started whispering, "Is that not the man who abandoned them? The father who left them behind? He thinks he can walk in now." The whispers grew louder, filling the hall. Obena's face turned pale. He tried to approach, to call out, to force his way into the moment, but the energy in the room pushed him back. The bride and her sister were untouchable. They didn't need him. Kamsi glanced at Oena briefly, her eyes sharp but controlled. Kaima held her head high, her smile radiant. Neither said a word to him, but their presence, their confidence, and their grace spoke volumes. The man who had once rejected them was now invisible in a room full of admiration for the very daughters he had abandoned. Obena's ego crumbled in front of everyone. He had dressed like royalty, but he was a stranger here. The cameras caught every moment, and soon, the whispers turned into murmurs of judgment and quiet amusement. He was alone in his grandeur, powerless against the very family he had refused. Adeora watched from the side, her heart full of pride and quiet triumph. She squeezed Kaima's hand and whispered, "See? They see your worth." Oena realized finally that no outfit, no title, no show of authority could erase the years he had missed, the love he had turned away, or the women he had failed. By the time the ceremony ended, it was clear to everyone, the real royalty in that room wasn't Oena. It was Adeora and her daughters, shining brighter than anyone had ever imagined. The music softened, and it was time for the speeches. Guests rose, clinking glasses and sharing warm words about love, family, and new beginnings. Kamsi stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes shining with courage. She looked out at the crowd, at friends, relatives, and even at Oena, who sat stiffly in the front row, expecting admiration. Taking a deep breath, Kamsi spoke. "I want to thank everyone who has been part of our journey," she began, her voice steady. "But there is something important I need to say, something that can't stay silent anymore." The room fell quiet, sensing the weight in her words. She turned to her mother, Adeora, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. Then, looking straight at Oena, Kamsi continued, her voice stronger now. "Our mother carried us alone. She cried alone. She built us from nothing." A hush fell over the hall. Adeora reached out to Kamsi, a hand trembling slightly, whispering, "Maybe," but Kamsi gently shook her head. She had to finish. "The only bad luck we had," Kamsi said, her gaze unwavering, "was believing his rejection meant we were not enough. But we are enough. We always were. And it is because of our mother, her love, her sacrifice, and her courage, that we are standing here today." Gasps swept through the crowd. Some whispered, some nodded, and some even clutched their hearts at the honesty of her words. Cameras flashed, capturing every reaction. Obena's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He realized in that moment that his daughters had grown into powerful, confident women, and he had no part in that strength. The hall erupted into applause. Guests cheered, some stood up, clapping and shouting praises for Adeora and her daughters. Tears filled Adeora's eyes as she watched Kamsi step back, her sister Kaima hugging her tightly. The twins had spoken the truth, not with anger, but with pride and love for the woman who had never let them feel abandoned. Oena sat frozen, humiliated and invisible in the room that celebrated the very family he had once discarded. Meanwhile, Adeora held her daughters close, feeling an overwhelming wave of pride and relief. Their story, their journey, and their triumph were finally recognized. The bad luck had never been theirs. It had always been his. And in that moment, the hall wasn't just celebrating a wedding. It was celebrating the strength of a mother, the brilliance of her daughters, and the truth that courage and love could never be broken. The wedding had ended, and the guests were slowly leaving, still talking about the beauty of the ceremony and the courage of the twins. Outside the venue, the night air was cool, and the street lamps cast a soft glow over the quieting crowd. Oena stood near the entrance, his expensive suit now feeling heavy and meaningless. He had watched everything, the speeches, the applause, the love that had been built without him, and it crushed him. He saw Eudora gathering the last of the decorations with Kaima and Kamsi nearby, smiling and laughing together. His heart ached with a mixture of longing and shame. He stepped forward, his voice trembling, almost breaking. "Eudora, please," he said. "Give me another chance. I'm still your husband. Can make things right. I can be the father I should have been." Eudora turned slowly to face him, her expression calm, serene but unwavering. Her hands rested lightly on the backs of her daughters, who now stood firmly beside her. She spoke softly, but every word carried weight. "Oena, you rejected your family when they needed you most. You walked away from us. You chose fear and selfishness over love. Now, you are facing the life that came from your choices." Oena's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, trying to explain, to beg, to cry out for forgiveness, but the words faltered in his throat. He realized she was right. He had no right to demand a place in their lives. The daughters he had abandoned were thriving, happy, and complete without him. Eudora didn't say another word. She adjusted her daughter's shoulders, giving them a small, reassuring smile, and began walking down the path away from the venue. Kamsi and Kaima followed, their heads held high, their presence a shield of strength. Oena took a step forward, then froze, surrounded by silence. Not just the quiet of the emptying street, but the heavy, suffocating silence of his own failures. For the first time, he understood the truth of what he had lost. It wasn't money, it wasn't status, and it wasn't even love in the abstract. It was a family, real and whole, that he had abandoned. And no amount of pleading could bring back what he had thrown away. Eudora and her daughters disappeared into the night, leaving Oena standing alone. The sounds of laughter and celebration faded behind him, replaced by the echo of his own regrets. And in that quiet, cold space, he finally faced the full weight of what he had created, a life without the family that had once been his everything. Months passed, and Oena's life sank even deeper. His compound, once full of noise and power, was now silent. The business deals had collapsed, friends had disappeared, and his health had started failing. He sat alone in the empty house, the walls echoing with memories of the life he had thrown away. No one visited, no one called. The man who had once chased his family away was now completely forgotten. Far away, Eudora's life had changed completely. She traveled to new countries, explored cities she had only dreamed of, and experienced moments of pure joy with Kamsi and Kaima. Wherever they went, her daughters made sure she wanted for nothing. And when they returned to Nigeria, they surprised her with a beautiful new home in Abuja, modern, spacious, and filled with light. Eudora walked through it, tears in her eyes, hugging her daughters tightly. Standing in the living room, looking out at the sun setting over the city, Eudora smiled softly. She turned to her daughters and said, "Blessings don't leave those who protect them. They leave those who refuse to see them." Kamsi and Kaima ran forward and wrapped their arms around her. The warmth of their hug, the laughter, and the pride in their eyes spoke louder than any words. In that moment, Eudora realized something profound. Her true legacy wasn't wealth or status or revenge. It was these two incredible daughters she had raised with love, courage, and resilience. The camera would fade on that embrace, capturing the real treasure, a mother and her daughters, unbroken, unshakable, and shining brighter than anyone had ever imagined. Oena's absence only made their joy fuller, their triumph sweeter. Their family, built on love and perseverance, had become unstoppable, and nothing could ever take that away.